Next, we're going to cover customizable basic security. This is going to allow you to determine exactly what areas of the software are protected under what levels of password. Let's take a look. From the More Options menu here, I'm going to click on button number 4, Security, and then I'm going to click on Edit. There are two settings under customizable security, Basic and Advanced. If for any reason Advanced got selected by mistake, or if you were using Advanced Security and would like to now come back to Basic, just click here where it says Basic Settings. Now you'll notice here at the left there are 3 profiles or password levels, Owner, Manager, and Employee. In previous versions of iGoFigure, this one was called the Access Password, not the Employee Password. Don't worry, I'm going to explain exactly what this Employee Password means and what it does. If I click here on Employee, at the right side of the screen, you will see a list of all the areas of the software where an employee is allowed and not allowed to go. And the system here is very simple. A check mark in a box means that access is allowed. No check mark means access is not allowed to that area. So for example, an employee right now will not be allowed into business defaults. Either a manager or an owner password is required to get into there, but an employee is allowed to cancel a member or go into collections and so on. And all of these areas can be changed or modified or selected exactly as you want them just by checking or unchecking any of these boxes. The same applies to manager. If I click here on manager, at the right I will see all of the areas where a manager is allowed and not allowed. And again, I can customize this in any manner that I would like. Finally, and this is very important, if you click here on owner, you'll notice that all areas are checked and they're grayed out. You can't make any changes. See, you cannot click in here. That is because an owner is always going to be allowed into all areas of the software, and you cannot change that, because if you could, you might secure yourself right out of the system. Now, I'm going to give you 2 examples of how you can customize security to make sure that it's clear. The first one is an example that we actually hear quite often, and that is, I would like to be able to have my employees print my paperwork without having to give them the manager password. Let's take a look. I'll click right here on Employee, and I will scan down to the Paperwork section. And take a look that this is quite detailed. You'll see here Paperwork, and you'll see Paperwork is not checked. So an employee right now does not have access to the Paperwork section. Under the Paperwork section are detailed entries. For example, adjustment, dues, print paperwork, and sales are the 4 tabs that are under the Paperwork section. And they're even further divided for you. Under the Print Paperwork tab, there are 4 different reports that can be printed: the Daily Gross Projection Sheet Summary, and Traffic Control Sheet. Now, these are all checked for you just for your convenience. In other words, if you do want to allow an employee access to paperwork, all you have to do is check Paperwork. And it's assumed you're probably going to want to allow them into all these sections. That's why I say that they're pre-checked for you for your convenience. But you can further customize this. For example, let's say that you would like to allow an employee into Paperwork, but not into the adjustments or dues or sales tab. You only want them to be able to print the paperwork. Look how easy that is to do. I just uncheck adjustments, dues, and sales. So right now, an employee is allowed to go into Paperwork. If an employee clicks on Paperwork, it's not going to ask them for a manager or owner password. But the only place where an employee will be allowed to go within Paperwork is to the Print Paperwork tab. If they try to get into the adjustments, dues, or sales tab, guess what? They're going to be asked for either a manager or an owner password, however you have that security configured. And one final way that you can customize this even further, let's say, for example, you want an employee to be able to print your daily paperwork, but only your traffic control sheet and your daily gross sheet. The projection sheet and the projection sheet summary are a monthly document. There's a lot of information there, so you don't want just a regular employee to be able to get into there. Well, that's very simple. I simply uncheck these 2, and now an employee cannot get into those 2 areas. A higher level password will be required. Let me give you another example, and again, this is a request that we've heard frequently, and that is, I would like my manager to be able to edit employee work hours. In previous versions of iGoFigure, only an owner password was acceptable to edit employee work hours. And we've often heard the request, You know, I trust my manager enough to allow them to edit employee work hours, but I don't want to have to give them my owner password in order to do that, because then they have access to the whole system. We'll take a look at how easy that is to do under Customizable Basic Security. We just come down here to Employee Records, and you'll see that sure enough, right now a manager is able to get into employee records, but not to edit employee work history. Well, guess what? Simple as that. A manager is now allowed to edit employee work history. Now, there's a few things that are important to know about the way that this employee password works. I'm going to come back to menu here without saving any of my changes. An employee password is not going to be asked every single place you go in the software. In other words, an employee, let's say, is allowed to go into member records. So the software is not, as soon as you click on member records, going to say, oh, great, what is your password? Same thing when you go to more options menu, let's say, or payments and product sales. An employee can go into payments and product sales. So if I click there, I go directly into payments and product sales. The system doesn't say, what's your employee password? As long as the iGoFigure software is up and running, it's assuming, well, somebody has started it up, therefore it's granting at least employee level access. If you require a manager and owner password, then it will be asked when you go to that area. For example, refunds. If I click on refunds, assuming I have not given an employee access to refunds, iGoFigure is now asking me for a password, an owner or a manager password. Which one is needed? Well, that depends how you've set your security if you're using version 3.6. If you have allowed your manager to go into refunds, then either the manager or the owner password will work. But if you have not allowed your manager to go into refunds, then only the owner password is going to work. Now, let's come back to security one last time, because I do want to show you a few areas that you should pay particular attention to. Let's go here under Employee, and the first one that I want to show you is called GF Startup. It's right here. GF Startup means the ability to start the software. You know, when you double click on the GoFigure logo and the GoFigure software begins to open and it says, please enter a password. Well, this means that the employee has the ability to enter their password and have the iGoFigure software open. Now, if you unselect that, you've taken away a right, one right in this case, the right to start the software. And that means that when somebody double clicks on iGoFigure logo and the software starts and says, please enter your password, an employee password is not going to work anymore. So only an owner or manager is going to be able to start the software. And similarly, if you come here to manager and you unselect GF Startup, now only the owner personally is ever going to be able to start the GoFigure software. Maybe that's what you want, but just be aware that that is there and that is what it does. Another one that I'd like to mention in specific is this one right here called security. Now you may be thinking, oh, security is very important in this area right here. I do want my employees to be able to get into security. But keep in mind, if you do that, an employee is going to be able to get into the security area, and they might be able to, or they will be able to check any of these things they want. As a matter of fact, they could just click here and say select all and give themselves the right to enter every single area of the software. Not only that, but as long as they're here in security, they could change your password. They could change your owner password to anything they want, and now they've completely locked you out of the system. They have changed security so that they have all access, and they've locked you out. So be very careful where you give this security access. As a matter of fact, you probably definitely want to restrict your employees from having security access, and we would even recommend that not even your managers be trusted, because it could create problems to have them go into security. You'll see it is not checked the way that the software comes when we ship it to you. There are some other areas that should be protected, and the ones that we recommend are those that affect all functionality areas of your software. For example, business defaults is an important area that should probably be protected only at the owner level, and member agreements, because that allows you to customize agreements, change the price and details of agreements. That should probably be also protected at a very high level. Owner only, if not just owner and manager. Okay, one final detail to tell you about basic customizable security, and that is, before you make a lot of changes, you should really carefully think about what you're trying to do and plan what you want. As you can probably see from here, there is a lot of power and flexibility that we have given you with this design. And let me give you just one example of why you want to be very careful as you're making changes. Let's say for whatever reason you've decided at your facility you only want the owner to be able to cancel a member. Well, you can certainly do that. You see right here it says cancel member. So you're going to take that right away from your manager. Okay, we're on manager right here. I'm going to unselect cancel member, and you think, okay, great, managers no longer have the right to cancel a member, only the owner has the right to do that. The problem is if you come back here to employee, you'll notice that an employee also has the right to cancel a member. It really doesn't make much sense to take away that right from the manager if you haven't also taken it away from the employee, because guess what? If the employee has that privilege, the system's not even going to ask you for a password. So be careful as you're making changes. Think about what you want to do. Review this list here to make sure you understand what's available and carefully plan out your changes. And that's all that there is to customizable basic security.